The Super Mario Brothers movie is continuing to break records behind the scenes. I say behind the scenes because, well, most people have stopped paying attention. But not us, no, because we know to keep watching to see what this little scrappy plumber can do. Nintendo has a big win on their hands. How big is it? What's it still doing? And how long can it do it? I'll say one thing, second place is here already. All right, folks, we are here to explain entertainment, keep you ahead of the culture curve. It's what we do each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel. Today's Thursday, and that means that the Pro Show is coming. If you are watching this video at the time of its publication, well, the Pro Show is just a few hours away. If not, remember that the Pro Show is Thursday, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's every single Thursday. We're about to get you into what is happening with the Mario movie. That's right, most outlets have drifted away. They have forgotten all about what is one of the biggest animated feature-length films of all time. We have not, because we intend to stay with this to see what happens. And right now, this movie has managed its way into second place all time. Now the question is, can it get first place? Now, we had a conversation about this during a members exclusive live stream, the Pro Lounge. And Lauren Connor was there to chat with me through this. We're going to dive into that just a little bit. After we do that one, I've got some brand new information about the movie that I'm going to talk about. And we're going to find out, can it truly be the top movie? We are going to Yahoo Entertainment. I'm not a big fan of Yahoo. And they have stolen Variety. So that tells you why I'm not a big fan. But they have stolen a Variety article that says the Super Mario Brothers movie sets box office record in Japan, underlining Hollywood recovery. By the way, they didn't steal it. Yahoo has an agreement where they share these articles out on their own platform. They don't have to create all the content. They just get it. So this is by Mark Schilling, again, of Variety. And let's take a look at this because, again, many people have just left behind the Super Mario Brothers movie. Now, I don't want to do that. It's still doing stuff. This article says, after opening on April 28th in Japan, the Super Mario Brothers movie has hit the JPY 10 billion, that's $71 million, milestone in just 31 days, the quickest ever by a non-Japanese animation in the Japanese market. In the latest 3-day period from May 28th to 28th, we'll work on that later. Clearly someone needs to adjust that. The film earned 632 million of Japanese currency, which is 4.5 million USD. Bringing its cumulative box office to $71.7 million, according to figures supplied by distributor Tohotawa. Based on an iconic Japanese game series, you guys know that, we don't have to cover that. They have not issued a final earnings forecast for the film. The title still has a way to go to catch Japan's all-time box office leader, Demon Slayer. We know about that one. We know how big that was. It will not catch it, by the way. But if Mario can break the $100 million mark in Japan, talking about USD, that is extremely noteworthy, and I think this also points to why Mario continues to make a lot of money, and people aren't covering it, because it's been buried by Guardians, it's been buried by The Little Mermaid. That's where all the oxygen, that's where all the energy is for the U.S. media, but that's not fair, because this film, despite being essentially done, I mean, it's still doing okay. It's on PVOD, by the way, now. It's still doing okay in theaters here, domestically and across the world. But there are some countries, some markets where it is killing it. And that's why we see its numbers continue to go up and up and up. And so also you've got the issue that in these Asian countries, The Little Mermaid is underperforming to such a degree that it's opening the door for Mario to continue pumping money. Now, the Asian countries have been accused of being very bad people, Lauren, but we sort of dissuaded that completely with Lorena Creole in a video this weekend, where we showed that Asian countries showed up in mass for the movie Aladdin in 2019. In fact, the top 3 international markets for Aladdin, a film that was headed by 2 Persian actors and by Will Smith, an African-American black actor, the 3 top markets outside of the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and China. It doesn't seem that those countries are hesitant to go watch films that star what I guess, are termed minorities in the United States. I don't, I don't know what to do globally with that. But those Asian countries are not hesitant to go see them, but they are hesitant to go see The Little Mermaid. Lauren, why do you think the Super Mario Brothers movie is doing so well, and why do you think the media is refusing basically to cover it at this point? I can't find basically any other articles touching this.
Well, I mean, why is it doing well? I think that's pretty obvious, especially in Japan. Mario is kind of almost a national mascot in a way. This is the hometown hero, and people are going to want to see that. As to why the media is not covering it anymore here, I think that's probably just North American myopia. I think that because it's on video streaming on demand now, interest has kind of flagged for the media to talk about it. They don't really consider it to be the top lining movie out in theaters right now. They want to talk about what's newly dropped. So I think that's kind of why it's fallen out of media coverage.
Yes, that's a good point. On the other hand, this is a movie which could pass the $100 million mark in Japan, talking about USD. That seems to be a story that will be difficult to ignore should it do so. Now it needs to leg out over a long period of time to make that, but it's
One
holding.
one question I had, I don't know the answer to this. I believe it had a staggered release, right?
Yes, absolutely. They held many of the Asian releases for that movie because those countries had what's called the Golden Week, and they wanted to hold until that time period because they wanted to generate as much money as they could on that front.
So has it now released in all markets, or are there still some markets that it's waiting to drop?
To my understanding, it has now released in all major markets. Perhaps there are some tiny ones that I don't know of, but to my best knowledge, it has. So let's go to the numbers now to take a look at this because it really is amazing, and we need to not be missing this like the media is. If we take a look at the Super Mario Brothers movie, now that we can look at this mostly in retrospect, although it continues to do some funds, we can see that number one, it's outperforming it international versus domestic. That's very healthy for a film. And of course, we know that Little Mermaid is not doing that. It's the complete opposite, and even farther to the opposite. We also see that currently, worldwide, it is nearing the $1.3 billion, and almost certainly will reach $1.3 billion. The other thing that I find interesting, everybody take a look at this chart. If you look at the way that this movie has performed over time, it's doing something very interesting in that the curve normally at the point it's at now normally bends to almost a flat line, right? And if we look at the latest data, Mario continues to go up. Now, it's not, of course, like it was when it first launched, but it is now beating the in-game look that you would typically have out of the pattern of how it should be performing. And so that's just that really is something, especially Lauren, as it is now available for streaming.
Now that was on the domestic box office right there, right?
Yes, that was the domestic box office chart, which shows that even here domestically, it's continuing to perform well.
This is repeat viewings. This is people
Oh, it
going
would
back and
have to be,
saying, "Hey,
yes.
yeah,
And then if we look at the international, there are some really fascinating things here as well. Mexico at
wow."
$84 million, Mario is the number one movie of all time for Mexico. That is just nuts. Japan, of course, they have not updated yet for Japan or for these other places. They're about a week out. Japan was nearing the $70 million mark. We know that it has surpassed that now. And and people might wonder, well, why is China so low for this film? Right? China typically is one of the top films internationally for movies that get to release there. Although the number that comes back in revenue form to the studios is quite small. They only get about 20% of the total revenues generated. But the reason that China is so low is that China has very strict rules and laws that prohibit the playing of video games. Their citizenry is highly limited in what they can do with interactive entertainment, and so that's why I think Mario is not quite as popular. And so it's certainly more popular than Little Mermaid, but it's not as impressive as you would see out of, let's say, Aladdin, where we were saying that China was the third or fourth biggest international market. So interesting stuff about Mario. Lauren, any final thoughts on this Mario movie and how it's doing as we get towards the end of its run now?
Well, I think there's a question that I have about that towards the end of its run part. Uh,
Yes.
I think what I heard was that they're not planning to do a physical release until around the holidays, right?
Right, and that was a decision that was made late in the game where they said we're gonna indefinitely pause that, and then they came out and announced it would be all the way until the holidays. Kind
Do
of
you
another
think
Top Gun Maverick situation.
do you think there's a possibility that they re-release it prior to the holidays with some additional footage and or a teaser for future MCU content?
Well, the only issue with that is I don't know if they've shot additional footage. They probably wouldn't go and add it now because of how expensive it is, and they likely have their teams working on the Zelda movie. Now, that said, I definitely could see them re-releasing it in some way. There was a film that did. Well, wouldn't it be fun if they did one where they had the bouncing ball with Peaches? You could do some stuff like that that would make it really fun. Do it in September when there's very little to compete with it. It gives it a fun kind of thing. But yeah, I could definitely see some form of a re-release to rejuvenate it and get it that last little bump it needs to perhaps land in the third spot overall for all-time animated films.
If it continues to perform as well as it has, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do that. I know that a lot of studios like to do that just to bump up their totals for that reason. And also, it'll get people excited about purchasing it for Christmas. So,
Yes, yes, absolutely. And another thing that's going to be interesting, Lauren, this deserves to be part of the conversation we have about Mario. At the same time that Mario is doing what it's doing, just phenomenal numbers out of this movie. Let's go back again to the worldwide box office, nearing 1.3 billion. And perhaps once this is updated, perhaps it has surpassed that. I don't think so, but it's going to. I mean, there's just no way it will surpass 1.3 billion dollars. Well, here's the thing that's going to happen next. We're going to get Elemental out of the Walt Disney Company. And Elemental is looking like it's going to perform under Strange World. We're talking about perhaps a $30 million opening. So, how much damage does this movie do long term to the Walt Disney Company if the Walt Disney Company cannot? I mean, we're not talking about can't beat Mario. We're talking about cannot enter the stratosphere in which Mario exists.
yeah, the position that Disney is in right now is they're in danger of no longer being culturally relevant. And that's a really bad place to be.
It's a
I don't
crazy
believe.
place to be. Who could have ever foreseen it going this badly this fast?
Yeah, I mean, especially considering the IPs that they hold, the vast number of characters that they have available to them, and yet none of them are being talked about in the cultural zeitgeist anymore, at least not that I am hearing.
Make sure to catch the Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.
Now, since Lauren and I had the opportunity to speak, we've actually had some breaking news. Now, this was just days ago that he and I had the opportunity to talk, and yet here we go. This out of Screen Rant by Nathan Graham Lowry. Super Mario Brothers movie is just one away from breaking all-time animated film record. The Super Mario Brothers movie is one away from breaking an all-time animated film record as recent box office taking saw the film overtake Frozen. It says the movie continues to climb all-time box office rankings as the film has overtaken Frozen. As the second highest grossing animated film of all time, Nintendo's animated hit saw Chris Pratt provide the voice of the iconic Mario. You guys know all that. We don't need to read it. As reported by Collider, despite the Super Mario Brothers movie releasing on home media, that's right, it's on streaming now. Of course, you got to pay for it, so not quite to that free streaming. That doesn't come until the holidays, which is on purpose, by the way. The film continued to impress at the box office as it delivered its final few weeks of theatrical release. The film's global box office totaled $1.288 billion, allowing it to climb to second place amongst the highest-grossing animated films of all time. The Super Mario Brothers movie surpassed 2013's beloved Disney film Frozen, which has a total international gross of $1.284 billion, and now sits behind its 2017 sequel Frozen 2's gross of $1.45 billion. Now, of course, it goes into talk about how the Rotten Tomatoes score for the critics did not reflect how this movie was going to do. Surprise! I'm shocked. You all can't believe it. Neither can I. Oh, wait, yes, we can. That's really all we've got out of Screen Rant. The question for you all, though, that you probably want to know is, can it become number one? For that, we need to dive into the numbers. Literally, it's the numbers website. Here's what we've got. As of publication of this video, the Super Mario Brothers movie is literally sitting at the very edge of 1.3 billion in terms of cash. Now, if we take a look at the graph, you can see that it has outperformed the expected modeling, and it's sitting up here still climbing at a time when most films, if you look at the graph, they kind of flatline here, right at the very end of their run. Not this movie, it's continuing to grow. However, I have bad news if you're hoping that it's going to take the top spot, and that is because here on this channel, we just tell the truth. And so we could be like some of these other outlets, and we could just blow smoke and tell you, oh, it's going to be number one, it's going to be number one. Well, you know, that was on the table at one point, but it's probably not going to happen. And there is one caveat to that. We'll come back to it in a moment. But if we look at the weekend box office performance and the daily performances, this is what we need to see. Well, I'll tell you what, let's drop down to the weekly. This will be a better indicator for everybody. If we take a look at this, you can see that we started March 31st, and then we've had a pretty decent drop. And decent, I mean, it's done well. I'm not saying it's dropped hugely. I'm saying it's done better than most movies. 43% drop week to week, 36% drop week to week, 33% week to week drop. That's excellent. When we had Guardians, it dropped 53%. And then since then, even with Little Mermaid, it's only dropped 29 and 21. Now, if we take a look at these numbers here, we know that Mario has been better internationally than domestically. So if we look at these are just domestics. So if you see 16, 13, those are probably more along the lines of, if you include the worldwide, something like probably 30 and 25 to 30. I think the international side has kind of wrapped up except for Japan, although domestically it's still doing quite well. Now, here's what it would need to do. So it needs to get about 200 million more to beat the Frozen 2. And that's a tall order. So it would need to stay in theaters longer than we anticipated actually staying. And that's the problem. But there is a golden lining to this. If they decide to reissue this film for some sort of director's cut in the fall, and I don't think that will happen, but if they did anything, like Lauren was saying, anything at all, throw an extra 5 minutes on it, have a bouncing ball during Peaches, it doesn't matter. If they could do anything to drive viewership of this in September, let's say, then perhaps it could take the top spot. That's the only way, though. Outside of that, this thing probably lands somewhere around 1.35, 1.36, somewhere around there, which is awesome. I mean, those numbers are just insane. But not enough to beat Frozen 2, which requires it to get over that $1.4 billion mark. It's a tall order. Can it do it? If they throw everything behind it. The kitchen sink strategy. But I don't know that they're going to. And so, second place is no shabby outcome for this film. Especially when you consider this is the start of a cinematic universe. If you know anything about the start of a cinematic universe, if done well, this is simply the launching pad for movies that could be far bigger and garner far more support. And for Disney, that should be terrifying. Well, folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Tell me what you think about Mario. Make sure you catch the Pro Show. It's Thursdays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time. That's PM, not AM. We don't wake up that early. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Floral, it's time for you to walk the plank.
What? Why?
Cuz you haven't subscribed to WDW Pro yet. Nor bookmark thatparkplace.com on your web browser to get great articles from great contributors.
What?